Science now shows your brain is wired to be addicted, not just to substances like sugar or alcohol, but to other people. Every smile, every like on social media, every nod of approval gives your brain a quick chemical hit. It feels good for a moment, but just like any drug, the high fades and leaves you wanting more. We've been told that constant connection is the cure for loneliness. But neuroscience reveals something shocking. When you live off external validation, your brain's higher centers actually shrink. Your awareness gets trapped in survival mode, leaving little energy for deeper consciousness, creativity, or spiritual awakening. Here's the real danger. If you don't understand this addiction, you can spend your entire life caught in a loop, chasing validation, avoiding silence, and unknowingly keeping your brain locked in its lowest gears. This isn't just about mental health. It's about your ability to access higher dimensions of self, to feel whole without needing someone else to fill the gaps. But there's good news. Solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness contracts the brain. Solitude rewires it. When you learn to be fully present with yourself, you unlock calm, clarity, and even quantum states of wholeness that science is only beginning to measure. In this video, we'll explore how to escape the brain's addiction to validation and why solitude is the most powerful doorway to rewiring both the mind and the soul. Every time you get a text, a like, or a small sign of approval from someone, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of anticipation and reward. It is what makes you feel a rush of excitement when your phone lights up or when someone praises you. At first, this feels harmless, but dopamine works the same way as it does in substance addiction. The brain begins to crave the next hit, and satisfaction becomes short-lived. Neuroscientists have found that this constant cycle keeps the brain in a restless state. Each burst of dopamine is shallow and fleeting, pushing you to seek the next one. Think of it as drinking salt water to quench your thirst. For a moment you feel relief, but soon after, you're even more dehydrated. Validation works in the same way. It never nourishes the deeper layers of your consciousness, only keeps the surface restless. Take, for example, Maria, who checks her phone dozens of times an hour. When no new message arrives, her heart races and she feels waves of anxiety. Or Michael, who cannot sit in silence for even 10 minutes without turning on the TV or scrolling endlessly. These are not just habits. Brain scans show that in moments of solitude, people like Maria and Michael experience spikes in beta brainwaves, which are linked to stress and hyperalertness. The sympathetic nervous system fires, cortisol levels rise, and the body prepares for a threat that does not exist. To the addicted brain, being alone feels like danger. This cycle has deep consequences. When the brain is flooded with dopamine highs and cortisol lows, it begins to lose balance. Neural pathways strengthen around seeking external approval, while circuits that govern self-regulation and inner peace grow weaker. Over time, the brain literally reshapes itself to depend on validation. This rewiring does not only affect mood, it narrows perception and makes it harder to enter the expansive states of consciousness where intuition, creativity, and spiritual awareness reside. Mystics across traditions have described this trap in different language. They warn that chasing energy outside of yourself fragments your spirit. Neuroscience gives us the modern picture. External validation keeps the brain trapped in a feedback loop of survival, unable to access the higher frequencies of awareness. In quantum terms, this loop prevents coherence. Coherence happens when your inner system is ordered and unified. Addiction to validation creates noise and fragmentation, scattering your energy field. What does this mean for you? It means this pattern may already be shaping your inner world without you realizing it. The agitation you feel when a message is delayed, the unease that creeps in when you are alone, or the constant urge to share every moment for approval. All of these are signals that your brain is leaning on validation as its main source of chemical balance. Left unchecked, this keeps you locked in a narrow dimension of self where consciousness is consumed by chasing approval rather than expanding into its natural wholeness. Recognizing this addiction is the first step toward freedom. It shows that the brain is not the master of your spirit, but a system that can be rewired. If the addiction to validation fragments the brain, solitude does the opposite. Solitude brings the system back into order. It is important to understand that solitude is not isolation. Isolation is being cut off against your will, which can feel painful and draining. Conscious solitude is different. It is an intentional turning inward, a choice to be present with yourself without distraction. Brain research shows that when people enter solitude intentionally, measurable changes occur. Beta brainwaves, which are linked to stress and restlessness, begin to quiet down. In their place, slower alpha and theta waves rise. Alpha waves are associated with calm focus, while theta waves connect to states of deep relaxation, insight, and even creativity. These brain rhythms mirror what ancient mystics described as entering higher states of awareness or tuning into subtle dimensions beyond ordinary thought. On a chemical level, solitude shifts the brain from dopamine-driven highs into more sustainable neurochemistry. Instead of the short bursts of dopamine that come from external approval, the brain releases serotonin and gamma-aminobutyric acid, also known as GABA. Serotonin brings feelings of contentment and stability, while GABA calms overactive neural circuits. Together, they create a baseline of peace that does not depend on constant stimulation. This is why, in solitude, you can feel whole rather than needy. The brain also undergoes structural changes in response to solitude. The prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making and higher reasoning, strengthens. The amygdala, which generates fear and emotional reactivity, becomes quieter. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. In practical terms, it means the more time you spend in conscious solitude, the more your brain learns resilience, clarity, and balance. The contrast with loneliness is striking. Loneliness activates the stress response, increasing inflammation, flooding the body with cortisol, and weakening immunity. Over time, it can even shorten lifespan. Solitude, however, reverses these effects. It reduces stress hormones, restores balance to the nervous system, and promotes neuroregeneration. Research has shown that even short periods of solitude can increase problem-solving abilities, strengthen memory, and expand creative insight. Beyond biology, solitude also has a metaphysical resonance. When you withdraw from constant external input, your consciousness begins to expand. Ancient traditions taught that silence and solitude are portals to awakening. Neuroscience now provides evidence that the brain in these states is literally shifting gears. You move from the noisy survival circuits into higher networks that support intuition, wisdom, and connection with what many describe as the quantum field of consciousness. The stakes are clear. If you never practice solitude, you keep your brain locked in its lowest gear, always searching, never resting. But when you step into solitude with awareness, you open the doorway to both neural renewal and spiritual awakening. It is here that science and mysticism converge. Solitude is not emptiness, but the fertile ground where your mind reorganizes, your spirit expands, and your entire being reconnects to its wholeness. If solitude is the natural path to rewiring the brain and awakening higher states of consciousness, the question becomes, why do so many people resist it? The answer lies in cultural programming. From an early age, most of us have been taught the story that we are incomplete without someone else. Movies, songs, advertisements, even family advice repeat the same message. Happiness only comes when you are validated, accepted, or chosen by others. This conditioning does not only shape your beliefs, it literally wires your brain. Neuroscience shows that repeated thoughts and emotional experiences carve deep grooves in the brain's neural pathways. When a child grows up hearing that being alone is a sign of failure or rejection, those beliefs settle into the nervous system. The brain begins to expect that wholeness must come from outside, not from within. By adulthood, the pattern feels natural, even though it is just a program. Psychology has a term for this: social conditioning. It explains why silence feels uncomfortable and why many rush to fill empty spaces with noise, screens, or company. But mystics go further. They remind us that these grooves are not truth. They are illusions created by the collective mind. They are scripts written to keep the spirit looking outward instead of inward. At a metaphysical level, these programs act like veils that limit consciousness. They convince you that you are fragmented when, in reality, you are already whole. Quantum science supports this idea in surprising ways. At the field level, every particle exists as part of a unified whole. Coherence does not require another particle's permission to exist. In the same way, your being does not require external validation to be complete. Biology itself gives proof. Your heart does not ask permission from another heart to beat. Your lungs expand and contract without needing someone else's breath. Your DNA carries the entire blueprint of life within you. Nature has already designed you as self-sufficient. The cultural message of incompleteness runs against the very structure of your existence. The danger of not recognizing these programs is subtle but powerful. You may confuse conditioned need with genuine human need. Humans thrive on connection, but there is a vast difference between authentic connection and programmed dependency. The first expands consciousness. The second contracts it. Without discernment, the brain keeps following the grooves laid down by culture, mistaking noise for nourishment and distraction for love. This is why breaking the cultural program matters. It is not about rejecting relationships or community. It is about remembering that your essence is already whole. Once you see through the program, you can step into solitude without fear. In that state, you no longer chase validation, but create from a place of inner sufficiency. This shift rewires both brain and spirit, aligning you with what ancient traditions have always called the true self. Science calls this coherence. Mystics call it awakening. Both point to the same reality. When your system stops chasing external validation, it reorganizes itself into harmony. In neuroscience, coherence describes what happens when brainwaves, heart rhythms, and nervous system signals become ordered. Instead of scattered and chaotic, they move in synchrony. This state is measurable. Studies show that when people enter meditation or deep solitude, their heart rate variability stabilizes, brain activity shifts into balanced rhythms, and the body conserves energy instead of wasting it. Coherence creates a sense of alignment that feels deeply natural. Quantum physics offers another lens. At the quantum level, particles become coherent when their energy fields are internally ordered. They begin to resonate as one, producing stability that radiates outward. Conscious solitude generates the same effect. By drawing your attention inward and withdrawing from external noise, you create a field of coherence within yourself. That field is not imaginary. Sensitive instruments have recorded measurable changes in electromagnetic patterns around the body during deep states of solitude and meditation. This is more than science. It is initiation. Across traditions, seekers entered solitude not to escape the world, but to encounter the deeper dimension of reality. In silence, the human brain's survival chatter fades and consciousness tunes into the subtle field where everything is connected. Many describe this as touching the soul, merging with the divine, or awakening to the unity of existence. In modern language, it is the meeting point between the human brain and quantum consciousness. Workshops and retreats have documented transformations that occur when people detach from external validation for even a few days. Participants often describe sudden clarity, bursts of creativity, or profound peace. Brain scans confirm these reports, showing increased synchronization between the hemispheres and higher-order networks becoming active. What appears mystical is also biological. Solitude gives the brain space to access circuits that everyday noise keeps shut down. The stakes could not be higher. Without solitude, your energy field leaks. Each demand for validation pulls fragments of attention outward, scattering your coherence and weakening your inner power. With solitude, those fragments return. Your system reorganizes. You feel whole, steady, and capable of creating from within. This is the hidden law that both science and mysticism affirm. Wholeness is not something you earn from others. It is a quantum state already encoded in your being. Solitude is the key that activates it. Once you touch this field, you realize that what you were chasing outside was always present within. In that realization, the brain and the spirit align, and the self steps into a new dimension of freedom. Understanding the power of solitude is one thing, but living it is another. To rewire the brain and awaken coherence in the field, solitude must become a practice. This does not mean abandoning relationships or retreating from life. It means learning to anchor your energy inward so that connection is chosen from wholeness rather than need. One of the most accessible practices is meditation. Sitting in silence for even a few minutes each day trains the brain to shift out of restless beta waves into the calm rhythms of alpha and theta. Neuroscientists studying meditation have found that this simple act lowers cortisol, increases serotonin, and strengthens circuits linked to focus and emotional balance. Mystics would say the same thing in different words. Silence tunes the mind into higher dimensions where the soul feels at home. Another practice is observing thought patterns without reacting. Each time you resist the impulse to check your phone or chase approval, you are rewiring dopamine circuits. Instead of feeding the old loop of craving, you create new neural pathways that anchor attention inward. Over time, this builds the brain's capacity for resilience and presence. From a quantum view, every time you choose awareness over reaction, you strengthen coherence in your energy field, keeping your system aligned and whole. Breath awareness is equally powerful. When you focus on the breath, your nervous system shifts from fight or flight into rest and repair. Heart rate variability improves, signaling coherence between heart and brain. Ancient traditions describe this as cultivating inner prana, or life force. Modern science calls it parasympathetic activation. Both describe the same truth. By returning to the breath, you access an energy that is self-sustaining. Journaling or contemplative writing can also serve as feedback loops of self-sufficiency. When you pour thoughts onto paper without judgment, you empty the restless chatter of the survival brain. This clears space for insight and clarity to emerge. Many who commit to this practice describe sudden intuitive leaps or creative breakthroughs. Neuroscience explains it as activating the brain's default mode network in a balanced way. Mysticism calls it listening to the voice of the higher self. The purpose of these practices is not to cut people out or deny human connection. Relationships remain vital. But the quality of those relationships transforms when you no longer depend on them to feel whole. You engage not from need, but from fullness. In this way, solitude becomes the training ground where both the brain and spirit remember their original design, coherent, complete, and connected to the quantum field of consciousness. We began with the reality that the brain, left unchecked, becomes addicted to validation. Neuroscience shows how this cycle keeps awareness trapped in shallow states, always seeking but never satisfied. Yet solitude reveals another path. It quiets the restless brain, balances chemistry, and reorganizes the nervous system into coherence. Mystics and scientists, though separated by centuries, describe the same truth. Solitude is not absence. It is the gateway to wholeness. Crisis often comes when the brain interprets aloneness as danger, but solitude reframes it as initiation. In solitude, the beta waves of anxiety give way to alpha calm and theta insight. Dopamine dependency dissolves into serotonin stability and GABA calm. Your field becomes ordered. Your energy no longer leaks outward. You begin to touch the dimension where your self is not broken, not late, not incomplete, but already whole. The stakes could not be clearer. Without solitude, you remain caught in the brain's lowest gears, chemically addicted and spiritually diminished. With solitude, you activate higher states of mind, heart, and field. You step into a consciousness that is no longer reactive, but creative. You remember that the deepest relationship is not with external approval, but with consciousness itself. Solitude is not an escape from life. It is life's deeper activation. It is the still point where the brain rewires, the spirit awakens, and the self recognizes its unity with the quantum field. Science proves what mystics always knew, that silence is not empty, but full of everything you have been seeking. The invitation is yours. Step into solitude not as a retreat, but as a return. In that space, you will find not loneliness, but the higher self waiting to meet you.